Hey guys, I'm Aditya Thakur and welcome back to Get Set Code by Newton School. In this video, we'll get started with patterns in Python. Now, this is a very interesting topic that I wanted to take up. What we'll do is we'll basically practice the concepts of loops that we have done in the previous two videos. So we have looked at for and while loop, and in this video, we'll just try out how to work with loops to create different patterns in Python. I am Aditya Thakur and I am an instructor here at Newton School for Python. Newton School is a platform which prepares you for a career in tech. It has courses designed for freshers, working professionals, and also for women with no tech background. And Newton School would first train you for 6 months, help you become an amazing full stack developer. They have a network of 300 great companies. So after your training is done, they'll ensure that you get placed in one of the best companies in the country. And the best part is that Newton School has a pay after placement program. So you don't have to pay anything until and unless you are placed with like 5 lakh CTC. And they have this Launchpad initiative, which is to help people who want to get started with coding learn the different programming languages for absolutely free. And this video would also be available on the Launchpad section. So as I mentioned, we have covered the loops in Python. There are two primitive loops, while loop and for loop. We have done both of them in the previous two videos. And in this video, we'll get started with patterns in Python. Now, this would be an interesting concept to take up. We'll see how to print out different patterns and how the loops help us. So let us get started with it. This is like a simple pattern. Ignore the dots right there, but look at the star pattern. So let me just go over to the compiler. I'll go over to newtonschool.co. If you do not have an account already, you can quickly go up and sign up. But since I already have one, I'll quickly log into my account. Now this should take some time, but after you are logged in, go over to the playground section under your profile. So this is the playground section. Go down to algorithm playground. You can create a new one or use an existing one. And this should take me to the compiler right here. So before getting started with the code, I'll select Python 3.8.1 and that's what we are working with. So we have looked at the pattern. It's a simple four-line pattern. One way of printing it out could be, writing it down manually. As in I could type in print star star, something like this. And this should print it out once. Let me just run it real quick, and this should print it out once. If I want to print it out 4 times, I can just copy paste the statement. And now if I run it, you'll notice like the pattern is printed out. There are 4 stars to it. So this is like a very tedious way of doing things. You don't have to be an expert to know that. After like you want to print out a bigger pattern, if there are more lines to it, you'll have to write them down, copy paste manually. That would be too much work. One way of doing this, since we have worked with loops, is to type in for I in range, give it a range 4, and then put out that one print statement, right? So let me just first clear the console because it is easier to know the changes that way. Yep. Okay, so this is like a loop for I in range 4, and then we are printing out this statement. So let me just run it once, and you'll notice like it also prints out the same pattern. It prints the one statement 4 times. So that is how basically a loop works, right? It will just iterate one statement over and over. Now what you'll notice is basically we wanted to repeat this one statement 4 times. That is why we use this loop. Now we also have these stars which are being repeated inside each of these statements, right? These stars are also being repeated 4 times. So what if we use a loop for that as well? That is when, nested loops come in. So you can nest one loop inside the other, and we'll just make use of it. So instead of using only one loop and then writing down 4 stars manually, let's also optimize this process and loop through the stars as well. So I'll create a loop for j in range again 4. I'm using a new variable called j, and I'll type in print star and a space. Let's just use a space for now. And let me again once quickly clear the console so changes are more visible. And let me just again come back to the code. Okay, so I have used one loop inside the other loop, and let's try running this once. And you'll notice like this is printing out the stars, but it's going to another line. Now what I wanted to do is basically print out the stars 4 times, then go to the next line. And how can I do that? Is specifying one more parameter called end. Okay. And then coming out of this loop and using yep. And there we have it. What you will notice is like this is the same pattern that we were trying to print from the beginning, right? What are the changes that I have made to this were basically this end keyword is a new keyword that I wanted to introduce. So this comes with the print function. What it does is basically defines how your print statement would end, right? So in this case, what we are doing is we have one loop outside, which is the I loop, and inside that we are using another loop called the J loop. This J loop would run 4 times, so it should print out this print statement 4 times. Now default, like the default print statements come with an end which is set to the next line. So every time like a statement is printed to console, the cursor moves to the next line. You would have noticed this for like when you type in print hello and you type in print world, right? Now if you run both of these statements, what you will notice is after hello is printed, the cursor moves to the next line. The cursor in the terminal, that is the where the output is being shown, the cursor here moves to the next line, and then it executes the next print statement and prints out world. Now if I want to print both of these strings to the same sentence, what I can same line, what I can do is I can specify end parameter for this print function. Now end, you can specify it something like this. Now what this means is basically instead of going to the next line, it would just print it out to the same line. The cursor remains on the same line. It prints out one space. I have given one space here, so it would print out this one space, and then it would execute this world statement, and hello world would be printed out to the same line. Now this is a very interesting concept because a default by default this end parameter is set to -n, which is an escape character. We have discussed escape sequence in one of the previous videos. Now what it does is basically shifts the cursor to the next line. If you want to keep it on the same line, you have to specify this end parameter for the print function, and it should print hello world to the same line, right? So that is basically about how end keyword is used. Coming back to our loop, what we are doing is inside this the J loop, what we are doing, we are printing out these stars and we are specifying the end to a space. So this would print out one star, then space, then star, then space, then star, then space. This would continue for 4 times. So after like the 4 stars are printed, the J loop would be done executing, and our interpreter would go to the next line. So it would come here. It would come to this print statement. This print statement is by default set to -n. So what it would do is it would take the cursor to the next line. Again, it would come to this I loop. After having executed once, the I loop would again run. So the j loop inside the I loop would run once more. So it would run once more, it would print out four stars, and then again there would be a line. So that is how it works. This inside j loop would run 4 times, and this print statement would run 16 times. Why? Because it would run 4 times once. It would print out this once, then this star, then this star, and this star, and after this it would print out this. So it would total run for 16 times, because first it would just print out this one asterisk, then it would run again second asterisk, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16. So that is how many times this one print statement would run. It would print out these 4 stars first, then it would exit this loop, go to the next line. Again this loop will run, print out the next 4 asterisks, and then again print statement, and like this. So the statements would be repeated 4 times in the I loop. I hope that makes sense. And this is how like nested loops work, and how you can optimize the process of printing out patterns. Now this was like a simple pattern, a 4 pattern. We saw how to do this simple pattern. Now I have made like a Jupyter notebook on this particular topic, which I'll link in the description. And what you can do is go over it once. And so we saw how to use multiple print statements, which wasn't good. So we saw how to use loops to optimize this process. We used one loop and the print statement. And what I wanted to show you is how to use 2 nested loops to print out the same pattern. So this was like using I and j loop. And I also wanted to show you how the end keyword works. I hope it was clear to you. So this is like how you can specify. We saw it with an example. Now there are some exercises that I want you to take up. The first is like a simple pyramid pattern. Then there is the downward half pyramid, and there is a complete pyramid and a diamond. So let's talk about how to print like a simple diamond parameter pattern. So let's talk about how to print like a simple triangle pattern and the reverse triangle pattern. And let's come back to our editor. So we have seen the normal loop, as in for I in range 4, right? Print out something, then we can use a nested loop in it for j in range 4. Print out like the asterisks, right? So we are working with asterisks, so we'll just use that and specify the end parameter, because we want to stay on the same line. And after this loop is done, we want to go over to next line, so we'll use like a empty print. So this is what the program is that we have been working with. Now what I want to do is basically, instead of printing it out like the whole 4 stars, I want to print out 1 star when we are on the first line, then print out 2 stars when we are on the second line. So sort of like a triangle, which is a right angle triangle, right? So that's what I want to do is. Now what you will notice is, if for each of these loops, I'll just print out, like I'll get rid of this loop, and I'll just print out like the value of I, right? So let me just print out like the value of I for this statement. So what you will notice is the value of I is first 0, then 1, then 2, and then 3, right? So that is how the loop works. It starts from 0 and goes up to the value that is specified. If like in range 4, then it will go up till 3. Now if I want to print out the right angle pattern that I said was, I want like 1 star on the loop. So 1 star on the first line. So what I can do is, instead of specifying 4 here, I can just type in I plus 1. If I run this program right now, what you'll notice is that the pattern is now in the form of like a right angle triangle. And how this works basically is, when I is here, when I runs for the first time, the value of I would be 0. But when it will come to this j loop, what it will do is, it will run till I plus 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. And since execution of loops by default start from 0. So what would happen, this J loop would run only once, which means it would print out asterisk only once in the first line. Then it would come to this print statement, go over to the next line. Again, the I loop would run. This time value of I would be 1. Value of I here would become 1 plus 1, which is 2. So which means that the loop, the J loop would run from 0. It would run for 0. It would print out this asterisk once. And then it would also run for 1. It would print out this asterisk once. When it will become 2, it would not run and it would just go over to the next statement. Again, it would become I value would become 2, which means it will run for 0, 1 and 2. And basically that is how like the statements would be printed out, and we'll have a write pattern printed to the terminal. And I hope this is clear. This is like the basic way of printing out like a right angle triangle. Now there is also another pattern. Let me just run it. You can also like use a input. So what you will have to do is, instead of using 4 here, you can replace it with a variable like num, and then you will also have to replace yeah, that's it. I think that is all you have to do. You have to replace it with the variable. So let us say like I want to print a 10 row pattern. So I'll just type in 10 and it would take the input and print it out 10 rows of right angle pattern. And this looks really beautiful. Now you also have a reverse triangle. How the reverse triangle works is basically you will have to just, like we were using 4 here, so you will have to go backwards. And how can you go backwards is, since the value of I is increasing 1 by 1, you can just use the highest value, which is 4, minus value of I. If I run this now, and you'll notice like a inverted right angle, reversed right angle pattern. And this again works like when you start, the value of I would be 4, the value of I would be 0, and this would mean here 4 minus I, which means 4 minus 0 is 4, right? So it would print out this asterisk 4 times. Next time when this loop would run, the value of I would become 1. When it would come here, it would become 4 minus 1, 3, which means the J loop would run from 0, 0, 1 and 2 would run for 0, 1 and 2, and it would print out asterisk 3 times and so forth. So I hope that makes sense, and we'll have the pattern again. You can run this as well and you'll get the simple pattern. So you can modify it based on user input, as in you can ask the user n equals to int input. Now this input function is used to take an input from the user. If I'll wrap it with an int, it would mean that I need a number. If you do not do that, input function by default takes in a string input from the user. You need to wrap it with an integer to make sure that it's stored as a number. So n would be a number in that case. Now again, I can type in 10 rows and you'll get like a beautiful 10 row pattern of a reverse triangle. And yeah, that is all what I want to take up in this video. In the next video, we'll look at how to print a pyramid pattern and how to do a reverse pyramid and a diamond. And we'll also talk about the range function, the different parameters that you can specify. And if you have any questions regarding this, you can comment them down. I would be happy to take them up. And this was like a basic exercise on working with loops. You can also use the while loop if you do not want to use the for loop. So I can just replace it while I is less than 4. Let's try running this once. And let's go down here and also add our increment condition. Otherwise, it would always be, true. So it would be an endless loop. We are getting an error. I is not defined. So I also need to define I. I can define it outside. So I equals to 0. and we got the same pattern. So you can also use while loop if you do not want to use for loop. So this is like a simple exercise. You can try using both for and while loop. You can try printing out these patterns, and in tomorrow's video in the next video we'll take up the reverse triangle and the other pyramid and reverse pyramid patterns. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, do subscribe the channel to stay updated when we put out the next video. And I am Aditya Thakur. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching.